Hey there, 5th and 6th graders. How's it going? Welcome to lesson 2 of music of the 1970s. Again, I'm Mr. Cassidy. If you haven't checked out the first video, make sure you go back and do R&B music first. I think you should really watch that video, even if you don't do the assignment there because you're coming in late. That's totally okay. Just make sure that you go check out that video first because it really gives you a background in what we're doing here, okay? But let's go ahead and move on to lesson 2. So remember that we are going to be working on music of the 1970s, and these are our genres, right? All the genres that we're going to be talking about this time. Today, we're going to go into hard rock, and some of these videos will do a multiple, but this time we're going to stick with just hard rock this week. I think hard rock is going to be an interesting one because I think this is one that a lot of you guys have said that you're kind of looking forward to. So let's get into it. But first, let's remember, okay, the different things that we're talking about here, okay? So when we're listening, excuse me, when we're listening to music, okay, remember that we're trying to be active listeners, okay? And active listeners are going to do a few things. And we're working right now on the first 3 questions, okay? So how does the music make you feel? What instruments do you hear? Right? And is the song fast or slow? Basically, what's the tempo like? Okay, we're working on those first three questions. So we're going to get back into that, just like you did last week, okay? And again, if you want an example of what those mean, go check out video number 1 again, okay? Go check out the R&B video, because remember, we went over one of those songs and talked about those 3 different questions, okay? All right, so let's get right into it, yeah? So today, we're talking again about hard rock, okay? So what is hard rock? Well, hard rock is opposed to soft rock, right? So think about it this way, okay? We had things like if you were in the 6th grade class this year, right? 5th graders, you might not have seen this, but we talked about rock and roll and how it came to be, right? What rock and roll is and where it came from and all that. So we know that rock and roll came from the blues and rhythm and blues, and then you have these like new electric guitars and things that were coming out in the 1950s, and it created this different sound, right? So these musicians who wanted to play blues and rhythm and blues, but were doing it a little bit differently with these new instruments, it became rock and roll, right? Rock and roll then developed further in the 1960s with bands like the Beatles and stuff, and that rock was a little bit different. It's not hard rock, okay? And a lot of us we call it rock and roll because it's not rock. And when a lot of us think of rock, right, that's not what we're thinking of. We're not thinking of that 1950s, 1960s music. So that being said, let's check out what we're talking about here. So remember that we started in the 1950s with rock and roll. And so rock and roll, let's do a little song here. So I've got my electric guitar here today. And we're going to start with, let's say, Bill Haley and his Comets. So if you were in 6th grade, you learned about Bill Haley. And Bill Haley and his Comets were a rock and roll band from the 1950s, okay? And they played songs, rock and roll songs. And so again, they're using like the 12-bar blues, and they're making songs that sound like this, okay? So Bill Haley and his Comets, Shake, Rattle, and Roll. You may have heard this song before. Sounds like this. I said shake, rattle, and roll. 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 Well, you never do nothing to save your doggone soul. Right? So you may remember that song, 6th graders and 5th graders. You may have heard this song before. I think Mr. Rossi and Mr. Griffin might have done them in years past. But what you're hearing is a rock and roll song. We're using our electric guitar, and in fact, a lot of rock and roll musicians in the 1950s were using this type of guitar here. It's called a Telecaster. It's a Fender. And they were making that kind of bluesy but rock and roll sound, right? I can make it a little warmer. We can make it sound like this instead. I don't know if you can hear the difference, but basically, we're talking about kind of a clean guitar, right? So it's a clean guitar. We're making our use of our kind of bluesy power chords, right? Yeah, that was rock and roll, right? Rock and roll kind of sounded like that. Again, we wouldn't consider that rock music, though, would you? Probably not. We moved into the 1960s, and we talked about bands like the Beatles. So, they were using kind of a cleaner guitar most of the time, too. So kind of sounding like, I don't know, something like this, right? So again, not hard rock. This is rock and roll, right? British rock and roll in this case, right? Yeah, so that was kind of the building of rock and roll through this time, through those 2 decades. When we get into the 1970s and really the late 1960s too, although we didn't cover that yet, sixth graders. In the late 1960s, we did kind of start to see some hard rock come out. Okay, hard rock wise, let me go ahead and flip back here. What we're talking about, okay, is bands like Led Zeppelin, right? And the song, one of the songs that I put on the playlist is "Immigrant Song" from Led Zeppelin, or bands like AC/DC. A song I put on the playlist is "Back in Black" for this week. What we're talking about is a much harder sound. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, when we're talking about clean guitar, right? That's what I've been playing so far, right? I've been playing kind of a clean guitar. Sounds like a guitar, right? I think just naturally what you would think of a guitar sounding like, it sounds like that. But it doesn't sound like rock music, right? When you think like rock music, you're not thinking like, like that sounds too clean. It's too bluesy, right? Okay, so what exactly are we talking about then? Well, distortion is going to sound a little bit differently, okay? Distortion is going to have more of this sound to it. Big difference, right? Okay. Right? It's got this like harder sound to it, okay? And in the late 1960s, bands really started kind of pushing the envelope on what those kinds of sounds sounded like, okay? They were basically, what they were doing was turning their guitars up, okay? So look at this definition here that's on the slide, okay? So it says distortion. Distortion and overdrive are forms of audio signal processing used to alter the sound of amplified electric musical instruments, usually by increasing their gain, producing a fuzzy, growling, or gritty tone. And that's really the key right there. So that last little piece, producing a fuzzy, growling, or gritty tone. Okay, so that's really the piece that talks about what distortion is. It's that like growling. So think about it this way, okay? Have you ever like gotten like a cheaper pair of headphones, or maybe like your laptop speakers or something like that, maybe your phone speaker, and you really kind of turn the music up? You know, when you turn the music up, it starts to not sound so good anymore, right? That's distortion. It gets that kind of crackly or gritty or fuzzy sound, right? That's the distortion. And when you have an electric guitar like this, and you turn up your amplifier, right, it starts to produce a fuzzy and gritty tone. Hear that fuzz, right? That fuzzy, gritty tone is the distortion, okay? And that's really what makes rock music. When you think rock star, right, that's probably what you're thinking of, is that kind of music there. This started in the late 1960s and really became really popular in the 1970s, okay? When you go through this playlist, you may have heard some of this music, okay? Let's check out a couple of these, okay? So I'm going to play a couple. So let's start with, let's start with a little bit of that AC/DC, okay? So AC/DC, Black and Black. The song starts a bit like this. Yeah, so as you can see, you probably have heard that song before, right? Definitely a song that's pretty popular. It's in a lot of movies, right? And you can hear that really distorted guitar in it, right? It's growling. It bites, right? That's not to say. So I think I was saying in class with some of the sixth graders that, definitely different music. This hard rock is not the rock of the Beatles, right? That'd be more like, if it was in the 1970s, we would have called it soft rock, right? Which we'll go over. I think maybe next time we'll do soft rock, so then we can really kind of juxtapose these two, compare and contrast a bit. But The Beatles did do some of this too, right? So I mean, even like the Beatles and stuff were experimenting in distorted guitar. So this song right here is a song from theirs, and it sounds kind of like this. Yeah. So yeah, that song again sounds very much more distorted. Not like other Beatles songs that we've done in the past, like "Love Me Do" that I just did a little bit, a few about a minute or two ago. So definitely, distorted guitar is really cool, right? And it's a very different sound for rock music, and it's what makes rock music. Yeah. I mean, if it's not, then it's soft rock, or you get different kinds of music. But this distorted, deep guitar really is a huge part of rock music, right? Hard rock, metal, all these things that we're going to talk about once we get into the 80s. I'm really going to use a lot of this distorted guitar. So um, here's the plan, right? Go back in. I want you to go to CNG Music. I want you to go into the Google Classroom there. I want you to listen to the playlist that I put up there from Spotify. Listen to, again, 5 of those songs, and I want you to answer those 3 questions, okay? Excuse me, of those 5 songs, okay? So 3 questions from 5 songs. Do that, and next time that we meet won't be next week because next week is spring break, right? But after that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do soft rock, I think, and we'll compare and contrast soft to hard rock, okay? Or maybe we'll do jazz rock. I don't know. I'll choose. I'm not sure. It's either going to be jazz or soft rock. Both of them are going to have cleaner guitars, so we can definitely compare and contrast both of those. I don't know. We'll see. We're 2 weeks away, so I'm not sure yet. Anyway, enjoy. I hope you guys enjoy the hard rock lessons, the hard rock music. Again, listen to some of these playlists with your brothers or sisters or your mom and dad. They might enjoy it too. Yeah, hope you enjoy. Looking forward to reading what you guys answer for those questions. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.